Hey everybody, it's Doug Green and I'm the publisher of Technology Reseller News, and I'm very pleased to have with me today Khalid Raza of Graphiant. Khalid, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to be talking about a data assurance service that you've recently announced. We're going to be talking about what is Graphiant, and I think you've got some powerful messages for the telcos as well. So I want everyone to hang out with us today and just find out a little bit more about this. But Khalid, real quick, what is Graphiant?
Graphiant is trying to fundamentally solve a problem that has emerged since the advent of cloud and also the AI. It's the internet is becoming the de facto transport. And if you look at the internet that is being used for content delivery, it's going to be very different. Cloud is the first step. Data is disaggregating, and data is disaggregating fast. Graphiant is trying to solve a problem that the internet has to transform from a content distribution network into a data exchange fabric. It's going to be, your data is going to be so much distributed that it needs complete connectivity as seamlessly as possible to either consume data, to sell data, or to process data. I think it's one of the most exciting times for the internet, which we call the internet for business or internet for AI. It's very different than internet for content.
And you were correcting me on the pronunciation of your company's name just a minute ago. It's a very specific reason why there's a graph in your name.
Yeah, internet is the largest graph theory problem that we're working on. And it just keeps on growing. How it grows, how it's consumed, how it's processed, it's very, very interesting the way the point and the juncture we are at. It is, everything is about data. It's how you are able to manage it, and also the times we are living in where state actors are looking at each other and saying, who is getting access to my data and how do I protect that? So from that perspective, Graphiant's whole architecture is centered around data, whether it's enterprise data, whether it's service provider's ability to process data, whether it's service provider's ability to provide the visibility of the data, how it's traversing, how it's traveling, where it's traveling, and enterprise's ability to see where their data is being connected, where it's consumed, where it's processed. That's the core of Graphiant's concept.
Now, in that spirit, you guys literally just announced very recently a revolutionary data assurance offering.
Yeah, so data assurance idea is, if you look at the things that have been happening lately, let me give you one example. There are government data, there are financial data. For certain reasons, you don't want that to go through a certain country or a region. You want that path assurance. I do not want this data to go through a certain country. Their encryption regulations might be different. Their encryption laws might be different. So you want to have it different. Then risk assurance. If a service provider has a certain vendor in their network infrastructure, I don't want that to be passing my data. So risk assurance, path assurance, and all the visibility. As the data egresses my national infrastructure or my national boundary, I need to know what destinations you're going to. It's very, very critical. So threat intelligence, along with this whole visibility of real-time data, is very critical. I mean, I always tell people the example of Uber. When you take an Uber ride, you look at the rating of the individual, you know exactly the path it's being taken. You do Uber teenagers, you know everything about it. Why are we not doing its most critical asset for an enterprise is their data? Why I don't know how my data is traversing. And we've been doing infrastructure, and I take full blame of SD-WAN. We've been doing it over the top. It's the first time I'm going to service providers and saying, you have the ability to become a data company. If you remain as just a transport company, there is no value to you. But if you're able to tell a customer how their data is traversing, if it egresses, I mean, literally, we found out very recently, so many service providers were breached. The lawful intercept network of United States was being breached by the Chinese. We didn't know. And from our perspective, from Graphiant's perspective, I know every egress destination we're trying to go to. We would have caught it in 5 minutes. that why all of a sudden a federal government connection is going to a site in China. It's a 30-minute job. And it's always the other adversary will push back and says, I'm not responsible for doing it, but your IP is a traceable element. The destination IP, I know exactly what's happening inside of the infrastructure. Why are we not putting this whole encircling every egress point around our national boundaries, which you will see happening? The internet infrastructure has so much data, which can it support? I mean, I love a quote from Dave DeWalt. One time I heard him speak at a WWD conference. He said, security will be driven by few things: cloud, crowd, and AI. So the crowd will source that information. So data assurance in Graphiant case takes threat intelligence from so many companies. We have intelligence of 250 million URLs. We have intelligence of 900 million IP. Now, correlating that IP to every IP fixed data that is egressing my infrastructure or a service provider infrastructure, I can tell you within seconds that this destination is vulnerable. It doesn't have a globally associated URL with it. This IP is going in the wrong country. And you can stop those breaches, because breaches happen through credential people. And my idea is, I've been a routing guy for 30 plus years. Routers have the intelligence to see everything. So rather than routing protocols driving data, let security drive routing, rather than routing pushing data to a security firewall. I'm not saying firewall should be gone. I'm not saying those. I consider that as data plane security. If I want to look deeper into the data, I can. But the control plane sees everything. When it sees everything, when it's egressing everything, we can start putting this protection layer and immediately real-time respond to threats, rather than waiting for data to be processed and find out, oh, we got breached. Every breach has an IP destination, and that IP destination can have a correlation in the cloud. So by moving these elements in the cloud, correlating this, tying security and routing infrastructure, we have a very strong geofencing to protect your data.
Now, with that, your other big message, or it's part of the message you just made, is you have a message for the telcos to change their focus.
So I've heard so many telcos trying to go from a telco to a techco. So telcos, if you look at all the services traditionally telcos have done, those services definitions were tied to a hardware provided, supplied by a vendor. If you look at the techcos, they launched their service very quickly, and it's done in the software layer, not tied to a hardware. What Graphiant is essentially saying, you have a network infrastructure, let us come in, we'll simply integrate into your IP MPLS network seamlessly. On top of it, we will create this software service layer, which is around data and services. And anytime you want to upgrade those data and services, you do in the cloud, you don't have to touch the hardware. The service has to be separated from hardware. I mean, if you look at the story, everybody in SDN talks about two layers: disaggregation of control and data plane. Graphiant is saying there is a third plane, which is called service plane. And the service plane sits in the cloud, operated from the cloud. I mean, literally data assurance. I'll tell you a very simple example. Data assurance and Graphiant, we launched our data assurance service within a quarter without ever touching any hardware in our infrastructure. So that is what will transform a telco into a techco, because the service definition is not in the hardware. It's a software service layer that encircles that existing network infrastructure. And now you have a value to provide. You have traceability of everything, and you become a data company rather than a connectivity. As long as a telco remains a dumb connectivity pipe, the value is not there. And for the first time, this disaggregation of data is providing a tremendous opportunities to telco to transform into a data company rather than transport or network connectivity company.
And this seems to be you shared with us for this presentation a couple of slides, this sort of wider message of yours for frictionless commerce.
So if you look at this, whether it's a SaaS, whether it's cloud, whether it's your data center, whether it's a SSE provider, they connect to this private, secure fabric that we've built. Graphiant today can seamlessly connect to any services without the customer requiring to build individual over-the-top connectivity. On top of it, anything that egresses this fabric, you have complete visibility and control over it. So what cloud guys did to computing, Graphiant wants to do to networking. We'll give you a software layer of programmable fabric, and we will innovate at the speed of software and let the customer decide how they want to consume services, whether it's SaaS, whether it's cloud, whether it's SASE. I have the complete control over the programmability of a network fabric. That has never happened. And then the service provider value would be you can program my network any which way you do want to, exactly the way you've been providing programming the application computing in the cloud. Networking hasn't seen innovation other than speeds and feeds, because the networking, if you look at the networking vendor's mindset, it is centered around hardware. And the more services I can cramp in my hardware, the better I can sell the hardware at better cost. Graphiant is essentially saying, let's take the service layer out. Service has to be innovated in software. It has to be cloudified. I mean, the traditional networking vendors will say, I can carry 5 million NAT entries and 10 million routes. Well, if you take that out in the software layer, the routing table is a database. Why is every router carrying that massive database? You can cloudify it with the universal availability of compute in the cloud. I can build modern databases and expand it. If you want Graphiant to grow its routing database, I can grow 10x within 10 minutes. You don't have to wait for my next hardware. So the service layer has to be abstracted from the network. That is a very key part of Graphiant's messaging. And from that, the network, once cloudified, the policy is cloudified. Changing policy is very simple. Network does not have to be programmed or provisioned. We are trying to automate 30-year-old, 40-year-old operating systems in networking and just trying to push speed and feed. That has to change. The service should be in the hands of customer, in the hands of the one who wants to control the service and program the service provider network. From Graphiant perspective, 3 very main things for us. Complete visibility of your workload as it traverses. The next wave that I think is coming, which is the second point I'm trying to make, AI and agentic AI is a massive distributed connectivity problem. Your agents don't work in vacuum. They access data where there is available, that which they call the perception. And once I have the data that I need to consume, then I need to act on that data. So the data sources are going to be distributed. Some might be sitting in your branch, some might be connecting at the LLM, some might be connecting at the local point, or some might be connecting to a different agent. So all of a sudden, if you see this, I want to consume that data. From that perspective, if data has to be accessed and it has to be consumed and processed, all of a sudden, this data movement has to be so fast and so real time. So from that perspective, the data consumption would be happening as a B2B connectivity, business partner connectivity, because the data is not completely in my control. So if you look at this, the Graphiant second point is agentic AI is a massive B2B problem. And finally, something that we strongly believe in, which is right around the corner, is post-quantum, the cryptography. That's the next thing Graphiant is focused on. Q2 of this year, we're going to announce post-quantum, that your infrastructure would be much more secure as compared to what we have today. Because DeepSeek just proved something that we expected the Chinese guys to be 2 years behind us. They're not. One fine day you want to find out that somebody has broken RSA or 2048 factorial, and we're not ready for it. We should be ready for it. So from the perspective of data, security, AI, I think it's one of the most exciting times, but we cannot continue to build the networks we've been doing for 30 years. It's not, I tell people I'm a grandfather now. It's not your grandfather's internet. It's a different internet, which is centered around cloud, the visibility and efficiency of your backbone. SD-WAN, MPLS, I hear those things all the time. They are on-ramps. I believe SD-WAN should be free. It's an on-ramp. Or MPLS, again, don't charge extensively for connectivity, charge for data services. That is what will transform a telco into a techco, become a data company. And finally, as I said, with our data assurance, agentic AI, data access distributed, enterprise accessing data, data assurance is a very key element for the growth of the internet and the agentic AI. I'm very excited about the opportunity of transforming my partners into data companies, not just simple transport companies.
And this little graph here that we put up, This sort of explains some of your thought process about this.
Yeah, from our perspective, right? First phase, disaggregation of data in the cloud. How Backbone acts upon it. You simply connect to a what we call a stateless fabric, and every service is accessible to you. Like I said, I'm not too keen about SD-WAN. SD-WAN to me was a 2012 Viptela problem, which we solved. It had value, but it's just a simple on-ramp. It's an on-ramp to the new generation of data services. I truly believe SD-WAN should be free. Now, finally, for me, the most exciting piece is this B2B. Business partners will be exchanging data because once somebody's data is worth some revenue for other partners. I love the quote that I recently heard from the Saudi finance minister. He said, tomorrow, Saudi Arabia wants to become a data exporter, not oil exporter. Data is the next oil. The one who understands, process, protects data is going to win this AI race.
And that's fascinating for the largest oil producer in the whole world to be looking into the future and saying, the future of our country is the export of data.
Exactly. The concept of data embassies, which is very fascinating.
And with all this happening, you see that the transformation of the telco is also an opportunity for the telco.
Yes, telcos are closest to the distributed edge computing growth. Telcos are closest to the agents might be executing randomly everywhere to access data. Telcos have one of the best opportunities, but they have to transform. They cannot continue on the path they have built their network as dumb pipes, because otherwise they will be bypassed. The pipes have to be smarter. Pipes have to be centered around data and complete visibility where their data are connecting. Otherwise, we cannot continue the path of over-the-top infrastructure build-out. It's not sustainable. It has to be underlying infrastructure, underlay of a telco, and then it's centered around data. Data sovereignty, data reliability, data visibility, data and transmission, data path control. All of those things are very, very critical for the future of connectivity and future of the internet. And it cannot be tied to a hardware of a vendor.
So Khalid, I really want to thank you for joining me today. This has been very interesting. You've been putting a lot of very good ideas in a very fresh way. And I think you might be opening up some ideas here for the telcos as they really approach the next 3 quarters of this year and also for the rest of the decade. I also understand you have some news coming up.
Yes, we are doing our B2B launch, which is centered around business partner connectivity and agentic AI. The center is around how business partners will exchange data and how agents will exchange data between business partners.
And the big picture here is that if people are paying attention to this launch, this engages an opportunity for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's the transformation. It's a moment of one of the most exciting transformations the internet has seen in the last 20 plus years.
And that's a lot. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened in the last 20 years on the internet, and you're proposing something big on that scale.
Exactly. The internet for AI.
So I think the month of March has a lot to look forward to. I hope everyone stays tuned. We'll hopefully be able to host some of that announcement right here on TR. Khalid, thank you very much for joining me today. It's been very interesting. Where can we learn more about Graphiant?
Go to graphiant.com.
And that's it. And there's all the information, the announcement, and also the upcoming news and so on.
And follow us on LinkedIn.
All right. Well, I hope everyone does. I'm looking forward to being able to report on that news later. But for now, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.